Sherry
Great.
Liptak.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Just give a second for everybody. I see lots of things spinning. We'll get everyone connected and then we'll get started. We are recording this morning, so I know I can see in your background that you're at work this morning. So if you have to step away for some reason or you get interrupted, we are recording and we'll make it available later this morning once we process the video. So no worries. And then we just encourage you to share. So if you could introduce yourselves to our presenters here in the chat box. They like to get an idea of who you are and where you're from. Right now we have a smaller group because of the time of day, so you get lots of attention should you choose to have it. So go ahead and introduce yourself. And while you're doing that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Well, I'm Beth Skelton. I'm one of the co-authors, and I am here in Western Colorado, and that's where I'm located, but I work all over, which is just an absolute honor and privilege to be able to travel and work with teachers either virtually or in person around the world. Tan.
And I'm coming to you from Cambodia, Swa Sarai, all the way from Phnom Penh. I work at international school there and I love it. And I work with all 14 teachers in grade 8 and 9. So that means 400 students.
Yeah, and that's actually really key to this book, backstory. A lot of what shows up in the book is directly from Tan's work with those teachers. And we keep adding to it because he's like, just came out of a class and here's the co-plan.
Right. And then you come back and say, okay, like here's something else we didn't think about that happened today. So you can go for that. All right, this morning I have some questions that I want to ask of Tan and Beth in their process and with the book. And then we can definitely open it up to questions you have. You could also put questions in the chat box. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm just assuming like we're all friends here. We've been doing this before. I'm Kelly Ryder. I'm the founder of English Learner Portal, and I have the privilege of having Beth and Tan as colleagues and course authors for English Learner Portal with their new course that's coming out based on the book and their existing courses that are there. So lots of fun to work with. So when they brought this up and said, hey, what about, we're writing a book, we said, absolutely, let's do something with that. So thankful to have everyone here today. And I'm going to start by asking them some questions. Again, feel free to add your question to the chat box or, speak up when there's a pause because we are a small group right now. We are recording. We've had a lot of people who signed up, but the time of day is a little rough for most people. We know, trying to coordinate our time zones here. So we are recording and it'll be shared on our website as well. So let's just get started with who is the audience? Well, I guess you have two different audiences. So who is the student group that the book is addressing? What kinds of teachers would be interested or would benefit from your book?
Todd and I are pointing at each other. So the students are students that have been learning in an English medium school for 5 or more years. So they're already at least in 4th grade if they started in kindergarten in a school where English is the medium of instruction. And that is international, US, Canada, Sherry, wherever they are, that they've been in our system and in our programs for at least those 5 years. And they're still needing support. And what happens with this group of students often is that socially, teachers hear them in the halls, they talk in class, they know how the system works, And teachers think that they're just fine, and so aren't actually providing maybe some linguistic supports that could really help move those students' academic English forward. So that's the target group of students. It's a subgroup of students formerly known as long-term English learners. And the teachers that we are really writing for are all of those classroom and content area teachers that work with the students in maths and science and social studies, language arts, across the curriculum, arts and science, music, because those teachers are the ones that actually are having the students most of the time. In the US, where I do a lot of work, many of these students don't have any direct instruction in English language development. So we're really relying on the content area teachers to develop their academic English. Tom, do you want to add to that?
I was just thinking, like, I am a long-term or before intermediate English student, right? I exited out of ESL in 5th grade, beginning of 5th grade. But when in 6th grade, when I was asked to read, I was like, the teacher said, okay, we're going to read a passage from this book. And we opened it up and teachers were taking turn. And like the nerd in me was like, I'll read, not a problem. And I started reading and I was struggling to decode the words. Like the word a is the, fine, and. But other words, I was like, how is this happening that a 6th grader who has gone through the American system for the last 6 years, how, and in kindergarten twice, how is it possible that this student who exited ESL cannot read a text, cannot understand it? Right? And so this is what we're working for. Kids who are no longer beginners, but kids who are at the intermediate phase. So we used to call them long-term English learners, as if something long is bad. Like we say artists who take years to perfect their craft, and musicians and chefs who take years to perfect who they are and their skills. We applaud them for all the times they've invested in it. But yet for kids, we like point a finger. We say, there's something wrong with you. You're still in ESL. What's wrong? And then this is what happens. We say, okay, maybe it's learning support. Or let's give you more English class. And we take you out of design. We take you out of art. We take you out of PE, all the things that you love. And this is what happens when we don't think there's anything wrong with them. It's just that there aren't the conditions needed for them to explicitly teach academic English. They already have the social language, but academic English is a whole new ballgame.
And as Tan was saying, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. We're in a room full of ESOL and multilingual specialists. So you all know the research from Cummins and Collier and the whole group about the average amount of time it takes to reach that grade level academic proficiency is somewhere between 5 to 7 years. And of course, that span is much bigger. You have some that superstars in 3 years and some that might take 10 years. That's all part of the normal trajectory. And so suddenly we're labeling students who are at that 5 or 6 years as somehow long-term or a problem, but they're really just on the average trajectory of what we know it takes to reach that grade level proficiency. So we're really trying to reframe how we look at the students and then how we look at the role of the content area teachers that are working with them in middle and high school.
Well, you touched on my next question a little bit already. So you were talking about why the term, and we had a great conversation about this months back when you approached me and said that you wanted to retire the long-term English learner pathway. And I was like, no, it's popular. People want to take these courses. And then we had this discussion. And so you've talked a little bit about that, but is there anything else you want to say about that decision to retire one series and then move to a new approach?
Yeah, so the term LTEL, long-term English learner, is a label that inherently carries with it a lot of deficit-based adjectives. And so the minute you say that student is an LTEL in our world, and those of you in this room all know about this, you're going to hear teachers talk about, unmotivated or struggling, or those deficit-based adjectives. And we're really trying to decouple that. the students that we work with and the ones that we know, they're so capable of so much. And we just need to add some extra supports in place, and they can far exceed, right? Like they can meet and exceed grade level standards without a problem. They're tons, right? Like he's a superstar. And that's how we see these students as well as the teachers that work with them. So we really wanted to get away from that label. And I couldn't put a book out into the world that said, let's not use the LTEL label anymore, but then have a course that says, you know, the LTEL, reading for LTELs, writing for LTELs, and speaking, oracy for LTELs. So I had to let the course go. But the good news is that in the book, we touch on a lot of similar things that were in that course. It's organized differently. It's organized according to the framework in the book, but labels matter. And both Tan and I firmly believe that that label influences teachers' perceptions of the students. And so if we say you're an experienced multilingual, we really focus on a lot of the assets that these students bring. Their experience in the school system, their experience with several languages, multiple languages. We focus on the fact that they're not just English learners as if that's the only thing that they're there for. We focus on multilingual, like you already are coming with at least one language. So the new kind of term that we're coining really focuses on assets. And I know Tan has some stuff to add to that about experienced multilinguals and how we came up with it.
Oh, we came up with it because we were figuring out, like, we can't kind of write a book that has the title Long-Term English Learners when we're saying, let's not talk about that. So we asked Dr. Monica Brooks, who wrote a book about that. And she said, well, why don't you call them Experienced Multilinguals? Right? And so we were like, yes, this is it. And here, let me give you an example of one. A first grader would have a hard time understanding this phrase, not only, but also, right? But a middle schooler and maybe a high schooler would understand if we said, you know what, I'm going to give you this phrase, not only, but also. Let's translate it into your heritage languages. They're like, oh, I get it, done. So the cognitive ability of students at the middle and high school level, that's their assets. That's one of their assets, to be able to quickly take a strategy or a skill or a concept. We don't have to teach that concept over, like photosynthesis. We have to teach the language around photosynthesis. And that's what we're trying to do. Here's another example. Let's talk about Oprah Winfrey. I love her. I listen to her podcast all the time. And normally I would say Oprah Winfrey is a person with significant reach and impact. But in writing, this is how we would say it. Oprah Winfrey, comma, TV talk show host, actress, philanthropist, CEO, comma, is one of the most influential people in the world. Not only is she a CEO, but she also opens a school. Look at that. Look at how rich and dense that language is. That is the language that we need students to use, but that's not being taught explicitly, right? Because we're so focused on moving them from being newcomers out of those programs, we're going to get lost. Right? That's what the book is trying to do.
Absolutely. So thinking about, I look at Beth's bookshelf behind her, and I know this is a pared down version of Beth's bookshelf. Oh, and she has the book there. I'm looking at Beth's bookshelf. I'm looking at, let's see, I see a couple other bookshelves here in our little video windows. And knowing mine, I'm moving from one office space to another. I know how many boxes of books I have packed. So tell me why this book is going to be the one that I have all dog-eared and post-it noted and tagged up and sitting on my desk at all times, and not over there on that bookshelf.
Well, if you would, Kelly, give me hosting privileges, I will share my screen in a second.
Oh,
this book is so different because it's not just a list of strategies. It's a framework. Right. And let me share you with you the framework in a second. The framework is starting with an orchard, and the orchard means we start with the big assessment. We start from the beginning. We start from the assessment, backwards planning. So Mateague and Wiggins. We start with the orchard as in saying, okay, what do we want the orchard to be? And then we plan backwards. So we go into the tree, which is the writing the integrated objective. And Beth, if you could share your screen as I talk, that'd be great.
You're actually a co-host.
okay.
So go ahead.
And then from there, we say, okay, now that we have the integrated objective, how can we establish comprehensible input when we think about the sun and the rain? And then from there, how do we structure the output, which is the fruit? Right? So when we have this metaphor, it's actually so much more helpful for students and for teachers, because now they move from strategies and activities to a framework of helping students, designing the assessment, designing the lesson plan.
While
would you like to share
Tan
anything?
is getting his screen up, because I think she made you co-host. I saw that, Tan. So while he's getting that up, there's another difference, Kelly, is that this subgroup of students, previously known as long-term English learners, these experienced multilinguals, this subgroup, there's really very few books focused on them. So Margarita Calderon, Evania Soto, the Freemans, David and Yvonne Freeman, that's about it. There's like 5 or 6 books out in the field that focus on these students. And this one, we are taking that asset-based lens. And as Tom said, backwards design from Wiggins and McTighe, and how do we make sure that language is part of planning from the very beginning all the way through. Tom, now that it's up, go for it.
No, that's all I have to say.
So
I think that's what I see in going, like the 3 of us do, going from place to place and working with teachers. And when we are talking about strategies, it's one thing. Like, everyone likes a new idea, a new way to do something, break up. You've been doing the same thing for years, you get in a rut. Everybody loves new strategies. But what I do find is that then people are left feeling like, well, but my students are still struggling with the same thing, even though I've got 15 new strategies in this workshop today. So that's because we have to get to the point where we're talking about the planning. We have to talk about why you picked that strategy and what are you including with that strategy. So I love that you're talking about, we have to go back further than strategies and really talk about who's sitting in front of you and what exactly do they need and how are we putting that in here. So that part I'm in love with for sure.
And that's the thing where we're trying to have teachers do. When we wrote this book, we said who we're trying to write this for. We're trying to say content teachers specifically, middle school and high school teachers. They do not have time to go get a master's program, a master's degree in this. They do not have, sometimes they don't even have time to sit with the language specialist, the English language specialist. So we're like, we need to give them a source that they can read and they can feel like they're sitting side beside Beth or sitting side by side besides me, right? Like, how can we plan as if we were planning with our content teachers? And that's the goal. So they can be more independent.
Absolutely.
And Kelly, that what Tan just said is actually a lot of what our work is. When we're working with teachers in schools, when we have the opportunity to do that coaching, or Tan doing co-teaching and co-planning, a lot of his work is we start with what's the summative assessment? Where is this whole unit going? And then we start right there. And that's the first place that we look at how do we make sure that language is embedded so the students can be successful on that very end goal. Now that we've seen the orchard or the forest through the trees, right? That metaphor, we just built on that. So once we know that big picture, now we can look at each daily lesson that's going to build toward that final summative assessment and say, all right, what's the language by the end of today? What do you want your students to be able to say or write as an exit ticket today? Even if they don't give that exit ticket, it's just a great way of planning. It's a great way of saying, all right, that's the focus, language and content for this whole hour that you have with your students. And so Tan is sharing a lesson planning framework that does exactly that. It's like to get to that integrated objective. And it's not so much like the objective writing it on the board, but the thought process that goes into, oh, I need to support them with this sentence structure, this academic language expectation, in addition to the content. And Tan and I tell lots of stories about working with teachers who are brilliant at teaching their content, and they get the point across in physics or math, and the kids are getting the content, but not having that academic language to express what they just learned. And so it's that extra layer through every step of the way, making sure that they've got language embedded. And we're just trying to say, you can do this even if you're not a language specialist.
And the
Right,
way they
and
can
I
do
would
it,
say most teachers are doing this to some degree and just don't realize that that's what's happening, because when you think about your content, if you're the math teacher, you're thinking about what I want my students to say when they get to the end of this problem. They may not necessarily realize they're thinking about it from the answer, the solution, the process, but all of that is embedded with language. So you're already doing some of it. And so taking those next steps to organize your thoughts there and add in the little pieces, the structure really helps. I like the structure that you all have included and that takes people step by step through. Tanya, we're about to say something there.
yeah, I was about to say the easy part, like the easiest part of becoming a language specialist, if you're a content teacher, is to say this. At the end of this lesson, what do I want my students to produce? Is it some kind of speech? Is there some kind of writing? Is it some kind of drawing? And then we say, can you do that first? As a teacher, can you draw it? Can you write out the paragraph? Can you write out the sentence? Can you draw out the diagram? So now then when you do that, you say, okay, how do I get my students to understand that? That's the comprehensible input part, right? Then the next part is, how can I get my students to sound like that? That's the structuring academic output part. And that's why we created this lesson plan template, because it's the way that we plan. We think about, okay, this lesson must connect to the summative assessment. And how do we get there? We get through the daily little lessons. And then we say, okay, well, how do I get my students to understand the content? And how do they communicate with the content? So this is the way we plan. And we hope to give it to teachers so that they can use it as well.
And as Kelly was saying, it's nothing like rocket science. It's backwards planning. It's just backwards planning with a focus on language all the way through. And actually, Jay McTighe co-authored a book that was similar, but his backwards planning and understanding by design is really intense. And we just kind of crunched and simplified and made it super concrete. So yes, it's based on all of their work, and we stand on their shoulders, but we try to make it like, you can take this from this little chat, take it right into the teachers that you're working with and share, and hopefully make a difference. And Kelly, that's another way that you get away from just, well, I tried that strategy, right? Like, did that fit into making the lesson comprehensible? Did that fit into supporting the output? Where did that strategy kind of fit in the big picture? It also prevents from having these really fun lessons that we sometimes see that somehow don't link to the big summative assessment. And I know teachers always talk about, like, I don't have enough time. I can't get through it all. And so if we keep that big summative in mind from the beginning, what are they going to be able to do at the end of this 6-week unit? It really helps them focus on the key and say, I know there's so much more you want to share about World War I, but this is your big outcome. This is what you need to continue to make sure each tree in that orchard leads toward the orchard, that if it's an apple orchard, we don't suddenly have cherries. Right? So
I remember when that understanding by design first came out, and I remember thinking, this is good common sense put into a book. And the school district I was working for, in our professional development office, we did a 2-year book study to really figure this out. And so while, like you said, it's wonderful information, and I still, how many years later have that as my method of looking at things, what day to day in the classroom, we don't have time to spend 2 years figuring this out. So I love, this book study is going to be, a couple months, your summer vacation, read a book on the beach, watch some videos with Beth and Ton, and way more practical than what has been out there in the past. Talk about, so what are, if someone opens your book and, we're always looking for that one thing we can do right away, and then the other things that we're going to have to take some time to really wrap our heads around and learn. So what is something that teachers will take away right away from the book?
Well, I think Tan just shared one of them, and that's that lesson planning template. Tan, if you wouldn't mind just dropping that in again. We had a couple people join since you put it in, and they won't get to see it. So I think if that makes sense to you, you can share that and start planning lessons that way right from the beginning. So that's an easy win. I think the first Amazon review that we got, which was just so heartening, right, Tan, is what is a takeaway? Is she said, the book is a model of what you want us to do. And that was huge for Tan. As we were writing, it's like, no, we have to break this up. No, we need a colored box. No, in fact, this is backstory stuff. We actually turned down a contract with a different publisher because we had to convince our editor that we would need pictures and color. And we both talked to each other after. I love this look, like what? And it's like, clearly she doesn't get it. Like we cannot stay with this publisher. And so then it put us off another 6 months while we fortunately came to Corwin, which was such a gift. And they were like, oh no, we don't put out books that aren't for color. Like that was just like right from the beginning, you know? So anyway, I think that first review saying we teach how to teach through the book, that was something behind the scenes that Tan and I were really, really focused on to make sure it modeled.
Right. And I see it as, you know, what do we leave behind? What do I leave behind when I leave a school after spending, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, however many days we get to spend with teachers? What do you leave behind so that the on-site coach or the administrators can continue to work? And so that is definitely, you know, that step-by-step kind of tool that if I'm the administrator and I don't have that background, then I would feel more confident going through and saying, let's do this step-by-step together and figure this out together. So a great tool to leave behind for folks to continue to grow. So those are my questions. What else do you want to share about the book or the process? And then we can open it up to the group of, if you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to unmute, because we have a nice size group here. You can feel free to leave your questions in the chat box.
Can I share 2 strategies? Like you said, like what can teachers use right away?
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
So I will share with you for like teachers using report, right? So let me show you an actual example. This is from when I worked with my 8th graders this year in art class. The teacher already had this assessment from last year. He wanted students to justify why you chose write an artistic intention. And this was the paragraph he gave the student, which was really clear. They basically had to say, why did you use eye contact, pose, scale, symbolism, color, texture? And we were like, okay, this is wonderful. This is intense. I don't know how to answer this. Can you show me what an artist would sound like? He said, well, this is how they would say, this is how they would talk about pose. I listened and I wrote it down, but I took out his content and I put in his sentence starters. I did the same thing for scale, the same thing for the symbolism. And let me show you what we did at the end. This is what it looked like. Pose, the pose that I use in this structure is because. Texture, and I added students' languages. Do you see bopa, bopa, bong, bopa? Do you see the kamai? It's right there, I know. The texture of my sculpture is. The texture helps to represent ... Right? And this is the kind of thinking that we're trying to get teachers to do. You do not have to teach gerunds. If you're an art teacher, you do not have to teach past tense. Your job is to teach the language that the artist would use to talk about scale, eye contact, and symbolism. Let me show you with you one more thing. Let me unshare and let me share my entire screen, because then I want to show you what I'm doing. I'm already planning for next year. This is crazy, right? I just want to show you. I'm planning for next year. Can you see my screen? This one? It's okay. So this is by week 1, day 1, next year, grade 9 unit, right? We're going to be looking at adversities, and we're going to watch this video. But at the end of the lesson, they should be writing a peel paragraph with full stops, capitalization, and sequence. How are they going to sequence it? All you have to do is list out the ideas in order of the thing you want them to write. For example, point. Can people overcome adversities? They have to say in their first sentence, yes, people can or can they not. Then explain what are some types of adversities that people encounter. Can you provide an example of an adversity and that comes from our Chinese disabled people performance troupe? Okay. And then the last one, explain how this person overcomes this adversity. Okay. And so like, this is me planning for next year. And this is the same thing that we shared in our book, meaning, okay, if you want a master's degree in language acquisition, this is what you do as a content teacher. You identify the content you want students to talk about, and you identify the sequence. That's it. So I identified the content I want students to talk about, but then I identified a sequence. And this part here is me teaching students how to write in full stops. I wrote my model paragraph using this example. And then now students are going to be working in small groups, and they're going to be writing the full stops in and capitalize. Right? And so that's like me putting in principles and practice that the things that we're sharing in our book. It's creating intentionality so that the conditions where students are successful are there in place. That was a lot. Sorry. It's like,
Taking a moment to process. There you go.
Really what Tan shared is that engineering a summative assessment, just intentionally looking at that final assessment and saying, how do I chunk it for language? How do I put in sentence frames potentially? How do I put in word banks? So when I taught this to one group of secondary teachers, they said, I'm not going to write those sentence frames. That's giving them too much. And I said, then can you teach them how to use the prompt to create their own sentence frames? Are you willing to spend at least one class period actually teaching students how to grab from the prompt the sentence frame that they need? Teacher said, yeah, I'll do that. I got to coach in that class. And it was just a great class because the end of it, one of the ESL teacher's daughters whose home language is English, she said to her mom, that was so great. I know how to write the answer now. So that was from an English speaker in the class who needed that as well, because she was overwhelmed with that prompt that Tan showed you originally. Like, here's what you need to write. They actually taught the kids how to break that down and find scale, find pose, and then write their own sentence frame. I'm like, fine with that if you teach the strategy. But you either have to provide the support or teach the strategy. We can't just assume. So we can go either way. And we talk a lot about learning strategies in the book because we're both really convinced that if students have a really full toolkit of their own learning strategies, how can I do this for myself? They're going to be successful way beyond just the classroom. That goes into life. If they're given any text when they get their first job and they have to read an application or figure something out, they have tools to do that on their own now because that's what we've given them as the learning strategy. So that weaves its way through the whole book, our learning strategies themselves, not just here's a teacher strategy.
Right. And Cynthia just cheered to that model right there. Like, here's the strategy that I'm teaching my kids. When you write, start with something broad. And then by the middle, give an example. You can't just talk around. And the example comes from the text that you're reading or the video that you're watching, right? And at the end, try to link it back to your topic sentence. Can people overcome adversities, right? And so students have to say, oh, okay, I have to use the words overcome, people, and the word can or cannot, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have kids be less dependent upon us and more dependent upon the strategies. And they, as middle school, high school students and fifth graders, they have the cognitive capacity to say, I'm stuck. What can I do to get unstuck? And they no longer need us to be in every class.
Yeah. And as we were writing, a lot of times Tan would say, you know, I'm really, really structured, but it's because I had trauma as a kid when it wasn't structured. So he's like, I'm teaching teachers how to be the teacher I needed. So.
And that's the best place to start, right? Is, you know, you've been there, you know, so looking from their eyes about how they need to be taught, not from what we think. All right. Any questions for Beth and Tan?
We so appreciate you just jumping in and having a little chat. Kelly said, we want an author chat. And we went, well, how is this different like than a webinar? She said, we just want to talk about the back end of the book and people just want to hear a little bit more about it. And so we're open, like really anything, you're thinking about getting it, or, you want to have something else specific, or you're concerned about this group of students. There are about 80% of secondary students right now across the US. So it is the largest subgroup of students. And unfortunately, I think it's a subgroup of students that doesn't get enough attention. I do a lot of shadowing in schools, and it comes from Ivania Soto's book, Shadowing ELs or Shadowing Multilingual Learners. The second edition is now MLs. And so I go in and I'll tell the teacher, like, I'm just shadowing Jose, or I'm shadowing Cynthia. And the teacher's like, oh, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about Jose. I'm not worried about Cynthia. Like, I know.
I am.
Without saying that, I know, because that student has learned how to get by. That student has learned how to float, to say, to like be okay with that intermediate. And the teachers somehow, because that student has the label, I was like, oh, well, they're language learners, so I can't really expect, or I can't really, that's just who they are. And we're saying, no, these students have the capacity, they have the ability to exceed our standards. We just have to provide those extra supports along the way.
It looked like Sherry might want to ask a question. Go ahead.
Well, not a question, more of a comment, because I suddenly have a burning desire to turn all of Ton's acronyms into like one-pagers or bookmark references for students, because he's got Peel and Read and all these different acronyms. And I'm like, there's a book right there just on his acronyms.
Sherry, we're waiting for your book to come out.
I can't pick a topic. I'm still so a hummingbird floating around at all the shinies.
When you're ready. We wanted to give you the book as well. And please type this code in, SAVE20, to get 20% off of shipping in the US, possibly Canada. But so that we wanted to make it affordable for you as well. So if you buy with Colin, you'll get 20% off that way.
You're already sending me mine. I'm just waiting.
Yes. We also have a course with English Learner Portal. We're so grateful that Kelly is hosting it. And so we're trying to differentiate in different ways. Like the course is like the high end, and the book is like the medium end. And then the free version, and we're going to be running a book club for free. So what'll happen is every Saturday in the middle of September to October, we'll do one chapter a week. And then you'll come online and we'll type, like, what are your thoughts about this chapter? And we'll ask questions. And so it'll be like, get your drinks, get your cocktail, whatever it is, pajamas. And then we'll just have a talk about the book, and it'll be live that way.
Very nice.
I know Kimberly said I know in July, if you want to cancel that and get the book in quicker, then you could use Colin. It'll come up soon.
I know that we have submitted a lot of book orders, so I'm sure there are people out there who would love to hear about that book chat in July. So our recording will go onto our website later. Let's see what time it is. Probably early this afternoon by the time we get to that. And so feel free to share with others who you know are interested in the topic, who the time didn't work out for. And on there will be ways, again, that you can sign up for the official 4-credit option book study. You can also order the book, and then we can't wait to hear about this July part that's going on. So lots happening.
There's also a free one on July 15th. We're having so many people on for ML Chat. I'll actually share it. Let's talk about this one. ML Chat Book Club is live. These dates, you just purchase the book, get online, we'll talk and we'll chat. And then let me get another one for you. It's the ML Summit. Yes, it's on July 15th. ML Summit. Sorry.
I got it. I'll drop it in the chat.
Yes, here you go. We're having legendary people in the field. So many of these people are keynotes, and they're just coming for free. And this is what will happen. It's Irina Chapa for technology. Dr. Irina McGrath and Michelle Shorey will be here for technology. Natalia Heckman and Valentina will talk about literacy. Natalia will talk about writing for middle school and high school. Valentina will be talking about a reading writing workshop for multilinguals in the elementary school. Beth and I will be talking about a book. And to close it off, Dr. Katie Topple, the fourth PSYOP author, with the original, Dr. Jana Javeria, will be talking about PSYOP, or sheltered instruction, and collaboration. So this is free, and the videos will be there for free, and you even get a certificate if you need a continuing education certificate. Yeah. And we'll hope to have Sherry possibly host it as well. Email coming, Carol, from Carol. That's it. So many free options.
Excellent. Right. So jot down those addresses, share with your colleagues. You couldn't put a better group of faces together than that ML Summit. So folks that we've all worked with in the past, it's great to see that they're continuing to reach out and offer these things. So I know I'll be popping in on that day as well to see those faces I miss. Everybody's been so busy. All right. Any questions, comments before we wrap it up?
Cynthia, go ahead.
We just got back our access scores, and we made huge gains. I'm the secondary coach for the district, and we had 11, which to me that was great because they are long terms. They are experienced learners. Let me shut the door. In the elementary world, we had 58. I mean 58.
And are you saying exiting the program, or what do you mean
Yes.
by that? Yeah, exiting?
Yes, yes. And so I congratulated my teachers on getting those 11 through. They had been in since kinder, and some of them were in 10th grade. So yay. The big push for next year is going to be doing inclusion. That's not comfortable for my teachers. They have never done that. I am very comfortable with it. But then this is just a brain yesterday. And because experienced learners are where my heart is. I want to help them so much. That's why I cheered with my cold coffee. But I've been dropped a bomb that I'm going to be teaching the newcomers next year. And I've been praying about it for a couple of days now. I'm asking my secondary teachers to get out of their shell and do inclusion, which is so comfortable for me. And guess what? Now I'm going to have to go back in the classroom. I've already retired. I've retired and come back to work. And now I'm going to have to go back in the classroom teaching newcomers that are imported to the school from another school.
Yeah. Cynthia, you're going to love it. And you will see this like huge growth curve, right? Which is super fun. And
Well, that's what I'm hoping, but I'm still kind of freaked out about it.
You're going to be great, and they will love you, and you're going to love that too. And will you still be kind of coordinator? Will you still be in charge of other? So
I'll still be the secondary coach. So now I've got 2 jobs.
Yeah.
I'll have them 2 hours in the morning, these newcomers, and I am secondary English certified as well as MLP. So I can give them an ELL credit, an English credit in high school, and an ESOL credit. So they'll get 2 credits.
That really helps. Those graduation credits,
Yes.
that really takes some pressure off. Well, you have backup here. You have
Thank you.
people who love newcomers, and as like Beth said,
And that's on
it's
my pro list. I'm
intimidating.
sorry to interrupt.
all right, it's intimidating at first, but
Yes.
there's not anything that you could do wrong because everything you teach is new and
Right.
and they need it. So you'll see so much growth. And, you know, you have all the backup in the world over here. So just reach out if you need some ideas or some support. And as
just-
well
Thank
as
you
the
so
rest of
much.
your teachers. I'm hearing that a lot of our office-based second language learning community being put back into schools and into classrooms and having less support for the teachers at a time when a lot of support is needed, just by student needs, by school needs. And so I've had contact with a number of districts who are saying, well, look, next year I'll still be the contact person, but I can't teach this class. And they're turning over some of that to us. So happy to help and support you any way that we can.
One specific strategy, I can't not help but not share a strategy when I hear these things.
Go for
When
it,
you
Tom.
when you work with new students, try to use something called the picture word inductive model if you're not familiar with it, but it really is beautiful and it teaches like full sentences. Like by the end of this class, students should be able to say the squirrel and know what a squirrel is, consumes the acorn. Right? And this is science.
Okay.
Right? And you're going to see this because it teaches, and there is a video by the lovely Valentina Gonzalez that she walks you through. Yeah, you're clapping because you love her, right? And she's amazing.
I love her.
Right, and this is what I learned from Larry Falazzo's book, and then she just shared it here on a virtual summit, which was the old name for ML Summit. I also shared
Okay.
with you the Highest Aspirations podcast with here.
Okay.
It's Kimberly Mitchell. She's a teacher from Katy ISD in Texas, and she changed her program from a newcomer center where kids are bused to a newcomer center.
Yeah.
And now they're fully integrated. And how does she get kids how does she get teachers to feel successful in supporting newcomers when they never supported newcomers before? And then two more books is Carol Salva's book. It's
Achievement. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay.
She wrote specifically for students who have interrupted education, but it's for newcomers.
Oh,
Fabulous.
yes,
fabulous.
I have that.
Oh, it's a fabulous book. And then the last one that I would say that is so helpful in developing their literacy, newcomers, yes, but in particular, all their literacies is Talk, Read, Talk, Write by Nancy Motley.
Okay.
So good. And why is it so good is because instead of having like, let's have a lesson about talk, and then let's have a lesson about reading, it's all integrated together.
Yes.
Right. And so this is really boosting students' literacy and English and language acquisition. So good.
And then Cynthia, just as a point of clarification, when you talk about inclusion, are you saying co-teaching, or is there a different way you're?
No, that's what we want them to just be comfortable to go in there and help with the teachers. So co-teaching, but co-planning can happen. So it would be more inclusion, but then we have to get the districts and the principals on board to schedule them correctly. Don't spread the emails around like pepper.
Yeah, so that's a huge role, and you're still going to be in that role, that leadership role. And if you can get that going before next year, that's a huge win. And then somehow get training for the teachers that are going to be in the same classroom together on how that can look. And of course, Tan's an expert in co-teaching, and we've got Andrea Honigsfeld there, and they really like to get them some kind of training, whether it's online or, reading or in person, because they just don't know what that could look like. And I have to say, I understand your language specialists who have never done it or never seen it. And they're like, I'm an aid. And they start to feel like less valuable, right? And that's nobody is
then like take your phone in. No.
So I think that the training and how this could look to what are the options, what are the possibilities for serving students when we're both two experts in the same classroom at the same time. And it's just getting their head around those kinds of options. And once they do, you have content teachers like one I worked with just last week, he was a high school social studies teacher. He said, I'm a self-prescribed curmudgeon. He said, I've seen changes come and go. And he said, this is the first time that I've said, this is a change of, I can't imagine any more teaching so low. He said, why would we not do this? And that was a huge shift because he got training. And it had been a whole year of them in the same classroom and trying, the the ESL teacher trying to make the change. And he finally went to a training and he was like, I get it. So if you can arrange that, or even if you're the one doing it,
Well, we're going to do this.
yes.
We've got this one. And there's one of she's having a seminar in Greenville, South Carolina.
Yes.
Next month? No,
Yes.
October. I can't remember. But we're signed up for that. But I had the same, thing happen with me, but it was in third grade, when I was teaching third grade, or with a third grade teacher. And she was the same way. She was a curmudgeon. And I was really like, nah, not really wanting to do this because anyway, she loved it. She absolutely loved it. She asked the principal to put all the ESOL kids in her room the next year so that I would come back in there.
Oh,
And it was fabulous. And when that word got out that Linda liked me,
right.
there you go.
That's all it
must
takes.
be okay.
That's all it takes.
That's
All it takes.
It is. That really is just somebody else. You always need one person who's the risk taker, and everyone else is watching. And then as soon as they see that everyone survived and there were actually some good benefits to it, then people are coming knocking on your door. So I always say, don't be discouraged when you only have one or two people who step up, because that's all you need to get it started. Right. And, spend the energy where people are ready to accept it, and the others will come. They'll come along.
Oh, yes. And then
They
when I
will.
moved up to the middle school, some of the students didn't like me being in their middle school, in their math class, but the students that were not MLs loved me being in there. So when I spent my focus on them, it was like, she's my teacher. Come over here. I need help. So it's been great for me.
Yeah, let them
Um,
fight over you.
That's right.
Kimberly,
Thank
you
you
turned
so
your
much.
camera on. Did you have a comment?
No, I just finally got it working.
Well,
It's
good.
good to see
It's
you.
good
From
to
the-
see your face.
It
From
is
the
wonderful
picture.
to see all of your faces. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to share two things because I cannot not help but sharing. Cynthia, you talked
you.
about clustering students.
Yes.
So I have an article about how clustering our MLs benefit everyone. And so
I have read it.
You have read it? Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh my-
And I have
And then I-
saved it and I have shared it with principals.
And then I shared
Yes.
another one thinking about, okay, how can we make pull-out instruction more collaborative? Because you said we can't co-plan, right? And so my basic suggestion is, okay, if your kids are being pulled out, can the content that they're leaving, can that be the content of the ESOL class? And so we would collaborate with that way. Just say, tell me what are you teaching? You're teaching the Renaissance. I'm gonna make my unit for language acquisition, the Renaissance, right? And so this is also an article for that as well.
Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Before we give away a book.
Bopia, yeah. You're on mute for some reason. I can't hear you.
Can't either.
Bong bố ba. สุดสดายบ้านสดับ I can't hear you. That's okay. You want to type? That's not a problem.
The joy of technology.
I know.
Hi, Robert. Good to see your face too.
Yes, it's so
When I
good to
said
see
we have
people.
experience, this whole room is like just a wealth of experience. I met everybody in the room. Great.
Yeah, we definitely have an amazing community of people who come together. And even when they're not there in person, that they know, you can reach them in an email in a quick second. So it's one thing I love about the the world of ESL that not all teachers know about is that support group in the background.
I always tell people that Twitter is my happy place and that I have set up Twitter and streamlined it. And I only follow people that inspire and uplift my career. And so I need to pick me up. I go to Twitter. And so, it's just because I have controlled it so very much and I don't have any trolls or any like that. It's my happy place. And so I really appreciate Twitter. I can't imagine where my career would be had I not met Ton and then discovered Twitter.
Definitely a wealth of knowledge there. And good for you for going through it, because it can be overwhelming to where you miss the good things through all the clutter. So that is something I should probably work on this summer, is cleaning mine up.
Facebook is for clutter. Twitter is my happy place.
Oh, there you go.
Speaking of a meeting of the minds, would anyone mind if we posted this like screenshot of our
No,
beautiful-
I love it. I was going to suggest it.
Great, thanks. I appreciate you guys. So Kelly, are we doing a book giveaway?
I did not figure out that randomizer, but I did the official put the names in a box method. That is my official book drawing. So I have my box. This is the high-tech version of
always
the
works.
free giveaway, right? So we're gonna do our mixing. Ton's doing his
Very
silent
techy.
drum roll over there.
For
All
whoever
right.
it is, just send Kelly your email and we'll get it done.
The official yellow paper, I probably have your email if you signed up for is Kimberly MacArthur. Kimberly MacArthur is the winner. So Kimberly, we will submit your information with our book order. We have to put in another one today because we just put one in yesterday, but now we have another
I'm
pile.
so excited. I don't have to
Orders?
wait until July when our budgets open up again.
There you
Yay.
go. I will need your address though. So if you wouldn't want to email me your address of where you want the book to come to, we can do that. So it's info@englishlearnerportal.com. I'll put it in here for you. All right, if you send me your address, we can get you on our order that's going out today to Corwin. And I see there's some South Carolina folks here. Are any of you going to that? What is it? It's the conference. There's a conference coming up in Myrtle Beach. There's so many conferences I can't think of.
And there's
the
one in
Carolina Tea Salt.
July. Yes, I'll
Carolina
be
Tea
there.
Salt. Will
I'll
you
be
be at
virtu-
Carolina
I'll be
Tea
there.
Salt?
Yeah, I'll be there virtually.
Oh, okay. I was thinking you were going to be there in person.
I know, me
Wonder.
too.
Okay, one day.
My second home is Little River, so I will definitely be at Carolina Tea Salt because I'll be spending a good chunk of the summer in your direction. All right.
Wow.
I have to
Thank you,
go get
Beth.
ready for work. Thanks for everything.
Yes.
No worries.
Yeah,
I
back
wanna
to
say
work,
thank you.
everybody. That's enough
Appreciate it.
fooling around.
Bye. Have a great rest of your
Bye. Thank
year.
you all.
Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day.
Lovely to see you all. Thanks for popping in.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Cindy. Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, Kimberly.
It's so hilarious how we all